Hello everyone and welcome to a new video deck test of a deck I like to refer as Rhystic Rock. Basically, this deck is a variation, is an alternative version with white instead of red or black of decks I previously played like Gruul Ponza and Golgari Rock. I got inspired by a Rhystic Circle, which I found really good in a deck with a lot of mana ramp. I played the Rhystic Circle previously in Gruul Ponza, and I also previously tried a Golgari Rock deck with removals for creatures instead of land denial, and I like it. Those green mid-range because mana amp to play faster your Annoyed Altisor, for example, is really cool. I also found that not relying on land denial and just relying on 8 for creatures is actually good if you play against a mid-range deck or an aggro deck. So basically you play the same shell as Gruul Ponza, but you cut your land denial to add more interaction to the creatures. Which means you lose more frequently against decks like with blue-white familiar or flicker throw, but you have a much more better matchup against aggressive strategies like Stompy or mid-range decks like Burst Bully, Izzet Fairies, Black Fairies, etc. Well, maybe Fairies decks are not mid-range deck, but tempo decks, but still, I think that cutting the land denial to add more interaction and more card advantage is obviously better against those decks because land denial is not good against tempo deck and is not good against aggressive strategies, at least usually. Okay, so we should start about which creature we can play in this deck. Basically, we have still the 1 mana ramp cards like Arbor Elf and Tapia Sprawl. I cut some copies of Wild Growth and 2 mana copies of Arbor Elf because I previously played those in Naya Ponza just to have more copies of Arbor Elf, and was obviously good with Rhystic Circle, but was good in Ponza because in Ponza you usually really want to stick as fast as possible your land denial and your threats. In a deck more focused on interaction, probably it's better to cut the extra copy of Arbor Elf and Wild Growth to add more card advantage in form of Llanowar Visionary, or just to add more interaction in form of removal spells or cards like Rhystic Circle. South Pac-Man remain one of the best green mid-range cards, so I think playing 4 copies is still good. Llanowar Visionary is still a value card, also a mana ramp card. I play obviously 4 copies of Annoyed Altisor because if I cut Boarding Party, I only have Annoyed Altisor as Cascade creature because I don't want to play the 8 mana Artifact Golem with Cascade. It just costs too much mana. And I also play Nila's Disciple because my idea behind this deck was to add more interaction with aggressive strategies, and since I was also lacking good creatures, I thought that Nila's Disciple is good because it's a sort of low missionary, but for mid-range deck, for mid-range or combo deck like Walls. I usually found Nila's Disciple in this build much better than Weather the Storm, so I actually think of Nila's Disciple. Probably is not so great, at least in the main deck, but is still a green creature card, is a 3/3 creature. I often found it helpful against decks like Fairies or Burst Monarch or Burst Bully or Mono Black Devotion, because gaining some lives is not actually bad, because if they have a faster start than yours, Nilas Disciple is the best way to stick a creature and get some time to build again your battlefield. Then we can talk about Mold Shambler, because I think Mold Shambler is a relevant main deck creature in this deck. I choose to play 4 copies of Mold Shambler, mostly for Rhystic Circle. Since I don't have boarding party and I don't have a lot of aggressive creatures, since I have only Annoyed Altisaur as a big threat, I think we are not really well positioned against decks like Boggles and Mono White Heroic, since they can their creatures are just too much large, too much bigger compared to my creatures at certain point of the game. So unless you have a removal spell and unless you have a Channel's Edict or a Southern Earth if the opponent is playing Boggles, basically you can fog lock them with Rhystic Circle, but if you can't attack them, or if you don't have enough time because maybe you draw 50 cards, you need some way to prevent them to gaining too much lives, or to prevent them to get too many big creatures. So if the opponent is relying on enchantments to get lives, for example Armadillo Clock, or cards like Ancestral Mask and Ethereal Armor to get bigger creature, Mold Shambler basically is a removal for enchantments, is also a creature. I always prefer Mold Shambler over Thermocast in my Punza builds. I found Mold Shambler really helpful while playing Rule Punza against Boggles and Mono White Heroic, because if I able to resolve a Rhystic Circle and then they're not able to attack anymore, Mold Shambler is the best way to destroy their problematic auras, so I can just wait with my Rhystic Circle on the battlefield, draw my lands and my creatures, develop my board state, play enough creatures, and then after I destroyed enough Armadillo Clocks, Lifelinks, Ancestral Max, and other problematic auras, I can just attack and win in 1 or 2 combat steps. It maybe seems a bit unrealistic, but I found it. I haven't found it unrealistic. I think you can do that. You can do that. At least with Naya Punza, I did that. I also was able to fog them with Rhystic Circle and then win after resolving 2 or 3 Mold Shambler, destroying their problematic cards. So for that situation is obviously good Mold Shambler. But taking aside the auras matchups, Mold Shambler, I think that is actually the best way to interact with Bonder's Ornament and Pestilence. Maybe we are not facing a Pestilence deck, but it's more realistic to face a Bonder's Ornament deck. So if your opponent is playing Bonder's Ornament and you don't have, and you are still playing game 1, and you are trying to win a game of attrition, and you don't have boarding party because you are not playing red in this deck, and we have only 2 copies of Custody Squire, and the other creatures are not enough large to interact with decks like Jund or similar, Mold Shambler can destroy the opponent's bounce lands or Bonder's Ornament to get some time and to get some card advantage from Wonders Ornament without letting your opponent draw cards with your Wonders Ornament activate ability. After all this creature of this talk about Molshem and Rhystic Circle, I think we can also talk about the other white cards in this main deck. First, I want to talk about Custody Squire. Custody Squire basically is one of the best white card in this format, but since it costs 5 mana, it's not really reliable or is not widely played anymore. It was played a lot in both Monarch and Hordes of Midrange. Right now, see few play because it costs 5 mana, and cards like Palace Sentinel, Thorn of the Black Rose, and other Monarchs are much better usually. Also, there is Wonders Ornament in the format. So Wonders Ornament is basically taking the same role as or same place as Custody Squire in those mid-range decks. I found Custody Squire good in this deck, and I also found really Custody Squire really good alongside another weird card I choose to play in this deck, which is Settle Beyond Reality. Settle Beyond Reality basically is a bad magic card. It's not good because it's a 5 mana relevant spell, which is really bad. But since I'm playing a deck with a lot of mana ramp and a deck with cascade creatures, it becomes good because you can choose both the modes of this card. So which means it's basically the white version of Exclude. You can exile one Mirror Enforcer, 8 Org, Ninja of the Deep Powers, while blinking your Seraph Packmate, Llanowar Visionary, or Custody Squire. So, Settle Beyond Reality works with in this deck because we play also Packmate, Llanowar Visionary, and Custody Squire, because they have a native ability, and blinking these creatures just to get another card is not bad at all. Also, you can blink Nila's Disciple to get extra lives, which is not bad. If you play against an aggro deck, being able to exile their creature and get some extra life, maybe 8 lives or more, is actually good. So I found, until now, Settle Beyond Reality much more performing as I was expecting at the start. So I think that including this weird card was a good idea. I think that playing white instead of red and not main decking more than 4 land denial spells, because Mold Chamber is a land denial spell, also a land denial spell, is actually fine. I found all the mid-range decks beside the land denial decks. Also found the first decks, aggressive strategies much favorable compared to Ponza. I found basically any other matchup similar compared to BG Rock, which is previously played and recorded for my YouTube channel. Obviously, Golgari Rock was a funny deck, but it was more oriented on 1-for-1 removal spells and also on cards like Creep Rats. So basically, if you want to have a much better matchup against combo decks like Elves and Wolves, Golgari Rock is much favored because it plays more 1-for-1 removal spells, and also it plays Creep Rat, which is a great card in combination with Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf. You can untap your Woodland Chest to get more black mana, and you can untap your Enchanted Forest or maybe Woodland Chasm with Arbor Elf to generate a crazy amount of Creep Rats. I was able to destroy to activate my Creeper for 10 or more damage, which is also good against decks like Tron because it's a fireball on a creature deck, on a creature card. But I found more favorable the aggro decks like Stompy, Mono-White Rock, and Boggles when I play Celestia Rock or Rhystic Rock, because I play Rhystic Circle. We should talk about the sideboard. In my sideboard, I think I'd like to play 4 copies of Muley Acid Moss, just to have a better matchup against non-interactive decks like Tron or Familiars, or maybe also against deck like Psychostorm, for example. Basically, against any deck enchanting their lands or relying highly on their lands, Muley Acid Moss is a good card. Basically it's a tempo advantage card, because it gives you extra mana and it destroys your opponent's mana. So you can also play against slower and clunkier mid-range deck like Hordes of Past, maybe Boros Monarch, and obviously Jund and Ponza. I don't really like usually land denial in this format, but I usually don't like playing only 4 land denial spells in my sideboard. But since I play Molchamber in main deck, and since I'm also playing green mana ramp, I found Muley Acid Moss as an extra for land denial spells fine. Then we can talk about Penumbra Spider, which I think is the best card we can play against any Fierce deck. I play 3 copies of Penumbra Spider instead of 2 copies, because you can also bring in against aggro decks. For example, if you play against Stompy, Molchamber is not good. So you can cut Molchamber to add Penumbra Spider. Stompy and other aggressive strategies need to interaction spell like Vines of Westwood, Savage Swipe, etc. to destroy both the Penumbra Spider and the Penumbra Spider token. I think Penumbra Spider is really good in any grid mid-range deck, especially if they play mana ramp. Relic of Progenitus, basically play Relic of Progenitus alongside Muley Acid Moss, because often you bring a Relic of Progenitus in the same matchup as you bring in Muley Acid Moss. Basically you bring in against any Flicker deck, and against combo decks relying on the graveyard, you can also bring in if your opponent is playing a mid-range deck with Rippling Rays. Why not? The 4th copy of Nila's Dishbowl, basically I play the 4th copy of Nila's Dishbowl in my sideboard because I wanted to main deck the full set of Molchamber. If I'm not playing the 4th main deck Molchamber, I'll play instead the 4th Nila's Dishbowl. But probably it's just because I like Nila's Dishbowl and Molchamber. Probably you can cut some copies, both from main deck or sideboard. Maybe it's not good to have the full set of both these creatures, but I like to have these creatures, and so I'm fine with 4 copies each. I think that's just a preference. Then we should talk about 5 white cards, which I mostly played against green combo decks. Last Breath, I think that is good against both Elves and Wolves combo. Coalition Honor Guard is huge against Elves. Basically, Elves and Wolves combo are bad matchup because I don't play a lot of removal spells. In this kind of deck, I prefer to rely more on creatures and bizarre cards like Rhystic Circle. So I prefer to not main decking too much removal spells. I found the Last Breath much better compared to other removal spells because I'm expecting the opponent to bring in removals for my enchantments and artifacts, so I don't want to play Journey to Nowhere or Oblivion Ring. Last Breath is both an instant spell and are removal spells which cost only 2 mana and only 1 specific mana. Probably you can also try a Make or Afterlife. Afterlife is actually good because you can destroy Uloma's Crusher, and I think that having only 4 copies of Settle Beyond Reality to interact with Ulam's Crusher or bigger creatures probably is not good. But since I haven't tested enough this deck, because I played only 3 leagues, so the 2 leagues I recorded and another leagues which I played while I was drunk, so it didn't end it real well. Probably you can try Afterlife, which is another weird white removal card, but I like Afterlife because I played it a lot on Tron before the print of Bonder's Ornament. Afterlife is just an overcosted Doomblade, but it doesn't let the creature regenerate, but it also create a white spirit under the control of the creature you destroyed. So it's not really great if you don't want to let your opponent a creature, if you don't want to give your opponent a creature. But if you just with the best white removal spells when you are just splashing white and you don't want to play Journey to Nowhere or Blue Ring, Afterlife is much better compared to Last Breath. If you want a 2-mana removal spell, Last Breath is better. I mostly chose Last Breath because I want a removal spell able to destroy Overgrowth Battlement and XP Guardian. So I preferred Last Breath over Sun Lens, which is another great white removal spell. Sun Lens. But also Sun Lens has a lot of bad thing because it's a sorcery speed card and you can't destroy or exile a white creature. Probably Afterlife is the best of these 3 removal spells, but I'm still sticking to Last Breath because I'm still testing this deck. Probably in the next leagues I'll move to Afterlife just to compare these two cards, and I think I will not never play Sunless because it's a sorcery speed and it can't destroy a 0/4 creature. I'd like to try to interact with a Mnemonic Wall or an Archaeomancer or a Sunscape Familiar. Collection Horror Guard I think is necessary against elves, and it can also be really helpful against Stompy, Burn, Mono-White Heroic and Boggles. Elves is a terrible matchup because you don't have any mass removal in white or green, beside a really bad card like Holy Light, which can't destroy your opponent creatures if they have an Evil Endenizen or a Timberwatch or a Spider Silk Armor. Also, the other card which I mentioned is Sandstorm, which is green. It costs only 1 mana. No, I don't have here. Well, it's just bad because it deals 1 damage, like Electricity, but only to attacking creature, which is not affordable. Usually you want to destroy your opponent creature when you are in the best spot, and if their opponent is attacking, they are in the best spot, and probably they can interact with your Sandstorm in a for example, with having Negate, Prohibit, Dispel, or any other counter spell. So, if I choose to play a mass removal spell in this deck to interact with elves, I'll go for Holy Light. But probably Holy Light is not enough, so I pick Collision Honor Guard because it's good. And is not good only against elves, and I still think that elves is a terrible matchup without any mass removal spell, so I think it is fine to consider elves so terrible that is not affordable to play bad card just to get a better matchup against elves. Well, I think we talk enough about this deck. I hope you found helpful this video deck tech. I hope you found interesting and helpful the video game play I played with this deck. I played for this deck 2 leagues, one recorded in English and one recorded in Italian, because maybe a lot of people, both Italian and non-Italian speakers, found interesting or helpful the contents of my channel. For the next decks, I will also continue to record an English playlist and an Italian playlist. Just let me know if you have any suggestion for next decks which you want to see me playing, or if you have any suggestion on how I record, if you think I can improve my videos and my gameplay. I gladly accept any suggestion and idea. Thank you for watching.